Hello, dear viewers. Andrew LaPomardo here. Did you miss me? Because today, we're going to be talking about what is going to happen in Dune 2, Reveal. The Dune universe that Frank Herbert created was expansive, intricate, and heavily detailed. Although it is considered by many as the best literary work in the sci-fi genre, it is its merits that pose an effectual hindrance from being adapted into a live-action film. When David Lynch made the Dune movie back in 1984, he suffered from the woes and challenges of adapting an 800-page novel into a film of roughly 2 hours. While Lynch's film was not necessarily a poor one, it failed to bring the desired effect and paint the accurate picture that Frank Herbert had intended. Nevertheless, Denis Villeneuve seemed to learn from his predecessor's mistake and convinced the studio that the only effective way of turning Herbert's novel into a film was by dividing the film into 2 parts. And well, seeing that the request made sense, the production company, Legendary Pictures, and distributors, Warner Brothers Pictures, agreed. With news that a sequel to Dune has been confirmed, it is only imperative that we dwell on the future of Villeneuve's film, and what may happen in Dune 2. But before we begin, let us warn you that in this video, there are going to be some spoilers about Dune 2021. But rest assured, your time here is going to be worthwhile. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Before we get into our theory about the future of the franchise, it is important to learn about the various factions that we saw in this overtly complex film. To begin with, the political system of the Dune universe is just like that of Game of Thrones. Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV rules over the length and breadth of the universe, but to have effective control over his empire, he has allotted planets to several Suridas, or lords and dukes. For instance, Duke Leto Atreides rules the bountiful planet of Caladan, and Baron Vladimir Harkonnen rules over the dystopian and industrial planet of Gadi Prime. However, the Emperor may grant the lordship of more planets to whoever he chooses. When the film begins, we learn that the responsibility of ruling over the planet Arrakis, or Dune, was taken from House Harkonnen and given over to House Atreides. The assembly of all the leaders of these various houses is called the Landsraad. Much like Game of Thrones, the Emperor has an imperial army called the Sardaukar under his command. These men are known to be the most proficient and prolific fighters in the entire universe, and have never faced defeat. It is fairly obvious that each house aims to attain power and domination over the other houses, while some even get more ambitious and try to take the emperorship for themselves by way of rebellions and coups. Among all this, there's another crucial faction, the Bene Gesserit. This is an order comprising of women who seek to take humanity to a course full of prosperity and happiness. For this purpose, the Bene Gesserit have spent hundreds of years crafting an intricate breeding program to ensure the birth of the Kwisatz Haderach, a super being with the power to look into the past and future. The Kwisatz Haderach himself would be free from the control of the Bene Gesserit, who can control others through their voice, but he would be the one leading humanity into the Golden Path, which is essentially an enlightened path that humanity must follow to avoid doom. So, Villeneuve's Dune begins with the Sardaukar saying that dreams are messages from the deep. This phrase has a deeper meaning than what may meet the eyes. Firstly, it tends to say that dreams are a message about the deep or our past. Furthermore, the word deep also implies the planet Arrakis, a planet that's arid and mostly deserted, only populated with the indigenous Fremen and the massive sandworms, among other indigenous animals. The next scene takes us through the landscape of the planet Arrakis. And there's a voiceover by a young Fremen girl named Cheney, played by Zendaya Coleman, where she explains the importance of the spice melange that is only found on Arrakis, and how the Harkonnens have brutalized the indigenous Fremen in the process of obtaining the spice. Interestingly enough, throughout the film's runtime, Paul has been having various visions and dreams about the Fremen, and several other things. And Jessica believes that Paul was, in fact, Kwisatz Haderach, the one who would lead humanity to the golden path. That is the basic setup of the plot and is enough for the viewer to understand what is happening. It is not before long that we learn of a Harkonnen plot that Emperor Saddam IV himself hatched, which helped overthrow House Atreides. We really don't want to spoil the delicious sequence of events that follow up to the crisis, and nor would we disclose the major deaths, but it is indispensable to learn about what happened, in the end, to figure out what could happen in the next film. So, after the fall of House Atreides, young Paul Atreides manages to escape with his mother, Lady Jessica, who was the concubine of Duke Leto Atreides, and also a Bene Gesserit. Their escape was facilitated by Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa. Although free and beyond the control of any enemies, Paul and Lady Jessica find themselves in the middle of nowhere. Wherever they look, they could only see an ocean of sand, and underneath the sand crawl the humongous sandworms that desecrate anything that causes rhythmic vibration. Under these circumstances, their only way out was finding the Fremen. In the end, Paul and Jessica do find the Fremen, and Paul is hailed as the Messiah, or Lisan El Gaib, and accepted into the Fremen community, so that they can work together and take over the planet Arrakis from those who wronged them. Now, it is evident that House Harkonnen has regained control over Arrakis and, by extension, the monopoly over spice production. The Harkonnens themselves were brutish people who held no qualms for violence and killed without an ounce of remorse. And with Harkonnens stands Emperor Shaddam IV and his Sardaukars. So, how exactly would Paul and the Fremen take over Arrakis? And would he and Jessica survive the harsh living conditions of the Fremen? I mean, they are used to lush greenery and waters of the bountiful planet of Caladan, and now they've suddenly been thrown into a planet that sees no rainfall. The conditions are so harsh that the Fremen drain water from the dead because water is that precious of a resource. Well, the first and foremost problem for Paul and Jessica would be adapting to the Fremen way of life and the harsh living conditions on Arrakis. Even if they do that, there would be much to achieve, because the Fremen are basically a tribal community of sorts, while their opponents, i.e. the Harkonnens and the Sardaukar, are prolific fighters who know how to use the blade and other weapons in more ways than one. If you have even the passing knowledge of Frank Herbert's novel, you'd know that Paul takes up the name Muad'Dib as his public name, so that might happen in the next film. Interestingly enough, Lady Jessica was pregnant in Dune with Duke Leto Atreides' child, and we should be able to see that Jessica delivers the baby girl, which would have immense consequences in the latter part of the story. Paul was shown to have dreams about Chani in the trailers, and now that they are finally together, their love should blossom and they should become a couple. Furthermore, Paul was hailed as the Messiah by the Fremen, and it would only be wise that he takes up that role and becomes something of a religious leader for the Fremen. But he would have more roles to perform. As you may already have deduced, these duties would be to train the Fremen in the way of fighting called the Weirding Way. Weirding Way is basically a fighting technique used by the Bene Gesserit, and is also called the Prana Bindu. Now, we know that the Dune universe owes a lot to the Arabic traditions, but Prana Bindu is an amalgamation of two Sanskrit words, meaning life and point. But simply teaching the Fremen a new way of fighting wouldn't be enough for all Fremen to consider Paul as their leader. He must do something that the Fremen do as a coming-of-age ritual. Paul will have to find his strength and ride a sandworm, the mighty 400-meter-long beast that can't be controlled. How Paul would manage to accomplish this feat would be a thing to behold. But if you still wish to know about worm riding, you can check out our video titled Dune 1984 Explained. Classic cult underrated magnum opus sci-fi that was ahead of its time. Moving on, the fate of Josh Brolin's Gurney Halleck, who was the weapons master of House Atreides and one of Paul's mentors, was left ambiguous in Villeneuve's film. This should mean that we might see more of Josh Brolin in the next installment. It's possible that Gurney would find his way to the Fremen camp and once again serve what's remaining of the Atreides family. But all of this would simply be a run-up to the climactic battle battle between the Fremen and the combined powers of the Harkonnens and Emperor Shaddam IV's Sardaukars. But that wouldn't be the end of the story, because Paul would go on to become the Emperor with the help of his little sister Aaliyah. The interesting thing about Aaliyah is that at birth, she has the memories of all of the Bene Gesserit that ever made it to the status of their leader, or the Reverend Mother. She would play a significant role in the film, and so would other people such as Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Dave Bautista as Glossu Raban, one of the Baron's nephews, and Javier Bardem as Stilgar, the leader of a tribe of Fremen. As far as new characters are concerned, we would see Emperor Shaddam IV and Fade Ratha, another one of Baron Harkonnen's nephews, who would be the polar opposite of Paul Atreides in strength and style. Fade had an extremely crucial role in the novel and David Lynch's film, where he served as the more cunning one of the Baron's two nephews. Villeneuve's film starts on the same lines as David Lynch's film, and tries to stay as grounded as possible in the source material, i.e. Frank Herbert's novel. Yet Villeneuve ensures that the film remained original, and he kept adding his personal perspectives to the narrative, which was a welcome move because he is trying to adapt a piece of work in the 2020s that was written in the 60s. And the technological advancements in people's mindsets has changed considerably in this half a century. Villeneuve let go of the epigraphs and the internal monologues that plagued David Lynch's film. Instead, the information that needed to be dispersed to the audience was done through dialogues and visuals. All in all, the setting of the film is sure to get under your skin and settle there for quite a while. To sum up, one can say that the film tackles and deals with all major plot points of the novel, such as the intergalactic politics, the power struggle between the Emperor, House Atreides, and House Harkonnen. But at its core, it serves as a story about Paul Atreides' coming of age, and his quest of leading a tribe of unknown and mysterious Fremen people towards a respectable life, while also trying to take humanity towards the golden path. Irrespective of who comes back in Dune 2, it is bound to be an epic film with more scope for action than its predecessor, and we would definitely see more battles, some worm riding, more hand-to-hand combats, and an epic finale. However, there have been more than a few Dune novels written by Frank Herbert himself, and then there is the extended universe, which his son Brian developed with others. So if Dune 2 becomes a commercial and critical success, Dune 3 would not really be far behind. They may even go for a prequel or a spin-off. Let us know in the comments of your opinion about Villeneuve's 2021 film, and where Dune 2 should head in the next installment. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.